end of the day and the last talk. So I'll be as quick as possible. I know how you guys feel. I feel the same as well. But anyway, there is something different here. So it's about mobile networks and what are some challenges that we have in the future of 5G. So one of the biggest challenges is that the existence of multiple networks that we have. Like we have 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and soon there will be 6G as well before we can actually experience 5G. So in this presentation, like I'm going to show you some of the challenges, like not just theoretical, but also like show you what practical challenges that operators are go through, and what kind of like security problems haven't been solved so far, even though if we are like 30 years into the age of like mobile networks. So this is how mobile networks used to look like in the past. Like you just used to make phone calls, like there are like 2 cell phone towers and 2 mobile phones, like people used to talk. So that is just how we experience mobile phones in the past. But now with 5G, this is going to completely change because you're bringing buildings, cars, like wearable devices, smart cities, critical infrastructure. Basically, like you're pulling everything into mobile networks, and all of them are going to be connected. And another challenge with these mobile networks is like many of them don't have their past or like previous attack vulnerabilities like fixed. So that actually brings like makes all the attacks applicable to whatever devices that you're seeing now. So pretty much like everything that we have and everything that's connected with our lives today. So before I actually go into what kind of attacks or like what I'm talking about, so just to give you who is in this game, like who are the players in 5G games. So apart from service providers like end users or big companies like who make equipment like Nokia, Samsung, Ericsson, Huawei, Apple, like Android, like you take like everything. So besides them, then there is also a lot of industries you see like agriculture, farming, factories, then public safety, smart cities. Like basically everybody is into the 5G game. So it's such a big game. And if you are wondering like, do you still have 5G? The answer is like clear no. But there are like some launches across the world. Like let's say there are like 265 commercial launches across the world. But all of them are like not real 5G. I think they are probably running an updated version of like 4G, which is 5G non-standalone mode. And this is not the real 5G. So what I mean here is like all the important security features that usually that should come with 5G are not there yet. So we are not fully secure with mobile networks. So I'm not saying that 5G is also fully secure, but just to give you who actually designed these specifications, or what I'm telling is like there is quite a lot of research that has been put into a lot of standard bodies, organizations, and associations. For instance, then there is 3GPP, like who is actually designing the specifications, who does a lot of research and then like a lot of effort to fix previous attacks and then bring up a new generation of mobile networks. Then to back up that, then there is HC, ITU, then ENISA, which is an agency newly set up for to establish like high level of security across Europe. So all these agencies and then organizations like work a lot to bring up like a very nice security, like high. The thing that it is highly secure, but the actual game is with implementation. So despite having a lot of specifications, standards, like high level of security protocols, if you don't implement them, then it's such a waste. And in 5G, you should consider that like not just your operator, like Airtel, BSNL, or Vodafone, but then there is like also cloud providers, then infrastructure providers, then verticals, like mobile carriers, then data connectivity providers. Like all of them like play a key role in maintaining security for 5G devices, you call networks or cities or pretty much everything, let's say. So I was doing a lot of research like over the last, let's say like 1.5 years in various domains on 5G networks. So first I look at handsets, also look at the network side, then cloud-based mobile networks, which are quite new, then also look at SIM cards specifically, because with 5G, the SIM cards are going to be slightly different. And if you're still using the same old SIM card that you use for 4G, maybe you may not get all the best security features that provided with 5G. And there are also like supply chain risks. Well, at least until the SolarWinds attack happened some years ago. Like nobody cared about supply chain, but I think now this is such a big issue, and it's also it's also such an important topic to look at. If you are like wondering what kind of attacks happen in mobile networks, so IMSI catching, such as like operating fake base stations, like fake cell phone towers, then device fingerprintings, location tracking, denial of service, interception. So these are like some common attacks that happen in mobile networks. And 5G networks are also like falling under the radar. But one important thing to look here is, or notice is that like back in like few years ago, like maybe 15 years ago, the equipment looked like I said, should be loaded in a heavy vehicle. It used to look so big, but now it can actually fly on a drone. So imagine like how easy attacks became, like in terms of like performing them, and the impact is also severe here. So it's like it's really important to take this thing seriously. Like when I mean like in terms of fixing the attacks in the networks, like being more realistic, rather than waiting for someone else to rediscover the attack and then redo it. So I just go through like some of the like attacks or like some of the findings over the last years. So I look at some of the 5G handsets, and one common thing I noticed was like most of the 3G or 4G flaws that I myself identified are still again repeating in 5G. So this could be like a problem with either the baseband developers, like there are, because baseband, the code that's running in the mobile phone itself, like so complex. And sometimes like it's hard to change. I can understand the pain of developers, but this is not like how it's supposed to be. And like besides that, then there are like other findings where most of the recent security features from 5G are not used. So which means you can basically enable like zero encryption, which means no encryption on the mobile networks. So that's like still a problem. Then if you're talking about IMSI catching, this is quite a technique that's used by law enforcement agencies or criminals against like any kinds of handsets. So IMSI catching is still possible in 5G because there is a downgrade. Like in the beginning, I said that there is a challenge because multiple networks exist. Like 5G exists, so 2G also exists. So you might be wondering like 3G is gone, but it's like the problem here is like 3G is more secure than 2G, but 3G is gone and 2G is still there. So that's like an irony here. And yeah, so moving on, then regarding SIM cards. So I fuzzed like a bunch of SIM cards, maybe 10 of them. Luckily, like they didn't have like serious issues such as SIM jacker kind of vulnerabilities. But still, I think like there is no limit on how many number of SIM cards you can fuzz. And there are like hundreds of manufacturers of SIM cards, and they might come with embedded vulnerabilities that nobody has an idea about. And it's important to like fuzzing is one useful technique to find vulnerabilities in SIM cards. Then looking at 5G networks, like I said, you have a non-standalone NSA and then standalone, which is a pure 5G network. So I found one network in in South Korea, I guess. So this was not actually having encryption enabled over the air. So which means like anyone with a passive device can actually intercept whatever the communication is going on 5G network. I mean, this could be a network misconfiguration or like a mistake by someone, or could be an automation failure as well. So a lot of things like come into play when you're trying to identify what is the reason behind a specific vulnerability. But I'm not always talking about the negatives. I have some good news as well. There are operators like that do follow security algorithms. They have mutual authentication, and they do have like good security features. What I'm telling is like they make use of those features. Like so that's the important thing. And there are like operators that follow, but at least if you look at capability protection, so this is only 2 out of like 4 Indian operators like implement them. So this attack, let's say, was reported back in 2017. And this is still not yet fixed in some of the networks today as well. And regarding c0c0n implementation, look, this is a new security feature in 5G, and none of them still use. Reason being, like no real 5G yet, so I can imagine that you cannot use this feature. Then with mobile IoT, like it's maybe in the beginning of the lecture you have seen all the devices being connected to the network. So all these IoT devices get connected to the network. and they are basically reachable via the mobile network. Like it means like remotely anybody can actually reach these devices. So on that line, like we were trying to look at one of the IoT networks from a big provider. So we could basically penetrate into their network and like also just create a big denial of service on their network. Why I'm telling this? Because when you're trying to connect these networks into 5G network, it's going to be like so complex, and it's common that you make such mistakes. Like you do not properly segment your network, you do not isolate them, and it's quite common that you make these kind of mistakes. But given we are like in 2023 and such a seriousness in cybersecurity, so it's important to consider these basic mistakes and not to make them. Though it looked like a basic mistake, but this can actually give access to the entire network infrastructure. So recently, like I was doing research with Amrita University here, and like their students actually helped me to analyze some of the Indian mobile networks, and are they still vulnerable to passive interception, active interception, impersonation, and tracking kinds of attacks. So these attacks were possible back in 2016, and we were trying to see if they are like still vulnerable even in 2022 and 2023. So we look at one operator. So what you see, the highlighted ones is like the security rating against a bunch of attacks. So that was in 2016, and the other one was in 2022. So you see that the ratings probably didn't change, like which means the attacks or the vulnerabilities did not get fixed. The same goes with another operator, like who is still vulnerable as well. Attacks or like vulnerabilities they were affected in 2016, still present in 2022. So this is not a good practice, definitely. And just I would like to conclude on these mobile networks. Like what is that? They are still vulnerable to spam, like let's say silent SMS kind of attacks, which is a very common technique used by law enforcement or criminals to actually track people. Then networks are vulnerable to location tracking and also active interception, because most networks, when the phone says that I don't support encryption, the network blindly accepts that, okay, fine, like let's not do encryption. So this is the most easy way to fool the network and then just make the network, or like make the entire conversation in plain text. Maybe some of you might have come across something called ORAN or Open RAN. So this is a new concept in mobile networks, because all these years mobile networks like remained like complete closed doors. Nobody knows what's happening inside. There are a bunch of providers like Ericsson, Huawei, Nokia. These are the big players and they dominate the market, and there's no one else. Like they play the game. Then you have on the mobile phone side Apple or like Google, and then like some players, that's it. But with Open RAN, it's going to be completely different, where there's going to be open hardware and also like open source software. So mobile networks will be built based on open hardware and software. Then I started looking at the supply chain, because supply chain will get more complex. So this is a simple architecture of how a mobile network might look like. Like this is me like standing with my mobile phone and then talking to the base station. Previously, like this DU or CU used to come from Huawei or Ericsson, like one of the operators. But this could be now any random company that is able to put up some software and hardware. So that's how open mobile networks are going to be, and they are going to be entirely dependent on software-defined networking and automation kind of techniques. So now you see this part, like there is something called RIC. This is the intelligence of the network. Like that's basically, that actually controls the entire like radio network. So I took the operating system and then tried to scan it. And what I could found was like most of the libraries that are present in this operating system actually is affected by a lot of CVEs, and this is not just like an outdated software. This was like 2 days before I actually did the scan, let's say 12th of August or something. And then like I could actually find a lot of vulnerable versions, and then I could also find what is the fixed version for that. So it's important to get these things beginning from the right, rather than like dancing in the end, like something went wrong and then let's fix it. So some data exposure on 5G, because I think like everybody is like worried about like how much of data they are sharing on mobile phones. And there are like quite some data security and privacy bills that Indian government usually launch, but I'm not sure like how many of them are basically like sticking to that, how much data is actually being exposed, or like even the networks are getting exposed. So all these things I think like create a lot of like mess in the end, I'm sure, because with 5G we see the direction it's taking and it's going to go that way. So just some few lines before I conclude, like what was telecom security so far? So this was based on implicit trust among partners, like the networks usually trust like users like us, like the networks trust another network, for example, like Airtel trusts Vodafone and Vodafone trusts PSNL. So there was a mutual trust, like thinking that, okay, why would Airtel attack Vodafone or something like that? So, but then there is also like one-sided authentication, which means only users are authenticated by the network, but not vice versa. And then there is lack of transparency in the network. Nobody knows what software is inside it. These are basically black boxes that hardly got pen tested. I mean, things are changing now, but again, with vendor-locked hardware and software, like I said, there is only few vendors who provide the hardware, and they only work with specific kind of software. So which means no other person apart from the company can actually write software for that given hardware. And then there is like insecure SS7 roaming interfaces. Maybe some of you might have heard about SS7 attacks. And things are changing, like I said. It's going towards like a zero trust policy where nobody trusts, or like nobody should trust the other one. So the network should not trust the user, the MNO, like the network operator should not trust, A should not trust B, and B should not trust like the internet verticals, like other companies. Like nobody should trust anyone. Like that's the appropriate model, I think, like which is important, like necessary now. And besides that, then there is a requirement for like security testing, audit, and compliance. Maybe if you're working in the testing or like domain, like if in the internet side, maybe you have a lot of documents to test, to comply, like to some regulations, all this stuff. But in mobile networks, like so far, there was nothing like this. And only in like 2020, like there was a specification that was designed by 3GPP, like GSMA as well, to actually pen test the mobile networks, or like not just pen test, but I would say like a compliance testing. So like with basic vulnerability testing, then also some enhanced vulnerability analysis. But this is, I think, like up to the vendors. Like from now onwards, like anyone, for example, you take Huawei, Ericsson, like or Nokia, like they should, everyone like should get their 5G products certified. So even if like India is getting these products like from elsewhere, like they should only accept these products if they are like satisfying to these requirements that we just saw now. I mean, it's a huge document with a lot of test cases and all, but only those kind of equipment should be like allowed. Well, you can say like, what about the devices that we have now? Because from 2G to 4G, we have like billions and billions of infrastructure, which was never tested, and it's still there, and it will still there for the next like 10 years, let's say. And you're bringing like new devices that at least should be like complying to like whatever specifications that are being defined now or available now. So some takeaways, and then I conclude. So there will be like extensive data collection in 5G, and this is a big challenge. Also location tracking, I think everybody observes on their phone. It's quite normal to see how your location gets tracked. Then besides that, then there is baseband whose location is also getting tracked. Then IoT and then network vulnerabilities is one of the biggest challenges. Besides that, then supply chain risk, which is quite new now. And this will be another big highlight in the next days, like looking in the supply chain. This is also complex because you're trying to, there is like shift left approach that industries took, but this is even like before, like even like looking at supply chain risk is even advancing back the like shift left approaches. So some ways to fix them is to have zero trust architecture, and also like flawless implementation of security features. I think this is like basic, like you just implement the security features correctly according to what the specifications are saying. Then beyond that, you test and audit your networks. Like most of them, maybe like what happens is like if someone reports the vulnerability, they make a test, they report a vulnerability, but once it's fixed, like nobody even like cares about it. apart from the hacker or the one who actually reported that vulnerability. So he tests again, and then he comes back saying that it's still there, or like not completely patched. So this happened in many cases, I guess. And besides that, then there should be continuous monitoring, which is, I think, like really missing in at least not only in India, but almost all the mobile networks in the world that lack continuous monitoring facilities, and also like proper defense from a denial of service kind of attacks. So I would just conclude with one line saying that there will always be like new attacks, or else I think like researchers like us would get bored. So there will always be new attacks for sure, but older ones like should die. Then this is also boring, like just doing repeatedly the same attacks. So that's my takeaway in this. Yeah. So any questions, concerns, and then comments, like let me know. But thank you.